Because you already did.
The worst part about being publicly humiliated by your wife isn't the moment itself. It's the 3 seconds of stunned silence afterward when everyone at the dinner table realizes what just happened, and you can practically hear them deciding whether to laugh or look away. To the one who pays the bills but never became good in bed. Marta's wine glass caught the candlelight as she held it high, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Our friends, former friends as it turned out, sat frozen around our dining room table like mannequins in a department store window. The expensive Bordeaux I'd bought for the occasion suddenly tasted like vinegar. I'm David Monroe, 47 years old, senior accountant at Hartwell & Associates. And until that moment, I thought I had a pretty good handle on my life. Sure, my marriage had been running on autopilot for the past few years, held together by shared Netflix passwords and the mutual understanding that divorce lawyers were expensive. But I never imagined Marta would detonate our relationship in front of 8 dinner guests like some kind of social self-destruction bomber. Happy to be of service, I managed, raising my own glass with what I hoped looked like good humor. Inside, something fundamental shifted, like tectonic plates realigning before an earthquake. The dinner had started normally enough. Marta, stunning at 45 with her auburn hair and designer dress, had spent the afternoon preparing what she called her signature entertaining spread, which mostly involved arranging expensive takeout on our good china. She worked as creative director at Pinnacle Advertising, a job that required her to stay late most nights, working on campaigns and client relations. Our guests were the usual suspects from her social circle. Greg Waters, her business partner, had arrived fashionably late in his vintage Porsche, all salt and pepper hair and practiced charm. His wife, Susan, ice-cold and old money, barely acknowledged my existence. Then there was Marta's sister, Victoria, the neighborhood gossip queen who treated our dinner table like her personal tabloid column. David's been working so hard lately, Marta had said earlier, her hand briefly touching my shoulder in what might have passed for affection, if you didn't know her. All those numbers and spreadsheets, so methodical, so predictable. The conversation had flowed like expensive wine. Smooth on the surface, with an undertaste of something bitter. Victoria regaled us with stories about other couples in the neighborhood, their affairs and financial troubles dissected with surgical precision. Greg dominated the discussion about business, dropping names and deals like breadcrumbs to show how important he was. Marriage is such a delicate balance, Susan had mused, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never had to balance a checkbook. Some people are just naturally more passionate than others. That's when Marta had stood up, wineglass in hand, and delivered her toast. Now, as the silence stretched into its 4th excruciating second, I watched the faces around our table. Victoria's eyes were wide with horrified delight. This was gossip gold. Greg looked uncomfortable, which was interesting. Susan appeared almost bored, as if public humiliation was just another course in the meal. Our son Ross, home from college for the weekend, stared at his plate like he wanted to disappear into it. Our daughter Amelia, sharp-eyed at 20, looked between her mother and me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Well, said Jake Morrison, Marta's co-worker, finally breaking the silence. That's honest. The laughter that followed was the kind you hear at funerals, uncomfortable and forced. Conversation limped along for another hour before people started making excuses about early mornings and babysitters. As I walked our guests to the door, Victoria grabbed my arm. David, honey. You know she didn't mean... She meant every word, I said quietly. The question is why she chose tonight to say it. After everyone left, I helped Marta clean up in silence. She moved around our kitchen with practiced efficiency, loading the dishwasher and wiping down counters as if nothing had happened. The domestic routine felt surreal after what had just transpired. You're being dramatic, she said finally, not looking at me. It was just a joke. Everyone knew it was a joke. Was it? She turned then, and for a moment I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt, maybe, or calculation. You're too sensitive, David. You always have been. That night, after Marta had gone to bed, I sat in my home office staring at my computer screen. 23 years of marriage, 2 kids, a mortgage, shared friends, intertwined lives. How do you untangle something like that? I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder I'd been filling for the past 6 months. Photos of Marta's car at restaurants where she claimed to be working. Credit card statements showing charges at hotels during her supposed client meetings. Phone records with calls to numbers I didn't recognize, always late at night. I'm an accountant. I notice patterns. I track discrepancies. And for months, the numbers in my marriage hadn't been adding up. The toast hadn't been spontaneous cruelty. It had been a declaration of war. Marta wanted out of our marriage, but she wanted me to be the one to pull the trigger. She wanted to keep her image intact while pushing me toward the exit. But here's the thing about accountants. We're patient. We're thorough. And we always balance the books. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a contact I'd saved 3 weeks ago. Trent Morrison, former police detective turned security consultant. He was also Jake's brother, which added a delicious layer of irony to what I was about to do. Trent, it's David Monroe. I think it's time we had that conversation. Trent Morrison looked like Central Casting's idea of an ex-cop. Thick shoulders, graying mustache, and eyes that missed nothing. We met at a coffee shop downtown, far enough from my neighborhood to avoid accidental encounters with Marta's social network. So, your wife's screwing around, he said without preamble, stirring sugar into his black coffee. And you want proof. I want more than proof, I said. I want justice. Trent studied me over his cup. Justice is a dangerous word, David. What exactly are we talking about here? I pulled out my folder and spread the contents across the small table between us. Photos, receipts, phone records, timeline notes written in my careful accountant's handwriting. 6 months of methodical documentation. I'm talking about exposing the truth, I said. Publicly, completely. I want everyone who was at that dinner table to understand exactly what kind of person my wife really is. Trent flipped through the evidence, his expression professionally neutral. This is good work, thorough. But if you're thinking about divorce, this should be enough to... I'm not just thinking about divorce, I interrupted. I'm thinking about consequences. Marta thinks she can humiliate me in front of our friends and then walk away with half of everything I've worked for. She thinks she's smarter than me. Maybe she is. I smiled for the first time in weeks. That's what she's counting on. But here's what she doesn't know. I've been 3 steps ahead of her for months. Trent leaned back in his chair. All right, I'm listening. I explained my theory about Marta and Greg. The late nights, the mysterious client meetings, the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching, the business trips that coincidentally happened at the same time, the credit card charges at the same restaurants on the same days. Greg Waters, Trent mused. I know that name. His family owns half the commercial real estate downtown. Old money, big ego. And a wife who controls the purse strings, I added. Susan comes from even older money. If she found out about Greg's extracurricular activities, it would be expensive for him. Very expensive. Trent was quiet for a long moment, processing. What do you need from me? Surveillance, documentation, and maybe some technical assistance when the time comes. Technical assistance? I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo I'd taken at the dinner party. Greg and Marta standing close together by our kitchen island, his hand resting on her lower back in a gesture that was just intimate enough to be inappropriate. I need better pictures, I said, and I need them to be seen by the right people at the right time. Trent grinned. You know, I think I'm going to enjoy working with you. We spent the next hour planning surveillance routes and discussing equipment. Trent had contacts who could provide high-quality cameras and recording devices. Nothing illegal, just professional-grade tools for documenting infidelity. There's one more thing, I said as we prepared to leave. I want to bring in a private investigator, someone with journalism experience who knows how to build an airtight case. I know just the person. Lila Stein met us at Trent's office the next day. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with short dark hair and the kind of intense focus that made you want to check if your shirt was buttoned correctly. I used to work for the Tribune, she explained, reviewing my evidence with the same methodical attention Trent had shown. Investigative journalism. I specialized in exposing corruption in local government and business. What made you switch to private investigation? Better hours, fewer death threats. She looked up from the papers. This is impressive work, Mr. Monroe. Most people in your situation are too emotional to document this clearly. I'm an accountant, I said. Emotion doesn't balance the books. Lila smiled. No, but it makes for excellent motivation. What's your timeline? I want this finished before Christmas, I said. Marta's planning a big holiday party. All our friends, both our families, Greg and Susan, the whole social circle. If we're going to make a statement, that's the venue. 2 months, Trent said. Doable, if we start immediately. There's one complication, Lila said, still studying the documents. Greg Waters isn't just wealthy, he's connected. If we're going to expose him, we need to be absolutely certain our evidence is bulletproof. One mistake, and his lawyers will bury us. Then we don't make mistakes, I said. Over the next week, we established surveillance patterns. Trent's security background gave him access to equipment that would make the NSA jealous. Long-range cameras, audio recording devices, GPS trackers that were virtually undetectable. Lila handled the background research, digging into Greg's business dealings and social connections. I maintained my normal routine, going to work, coming home, having dinner with Marta and the kids when they were around. But now every conversation felt like performance art. Marta would mention working late, and I'd nod sympathetically while mentally noting the time and date. She'd take phone calls in another room, and I'd listen to the tone of her voice through the walls. "You seem different lately," she said one evening as we watched television together on the couch. "More attentive." "Maybe your toast was a wake-up call," I said. "Maybe I need to pay more attention to what's important." She looked at me suspiciously. "Since when do you take criticism well?" "Since I realized you might be right about some things." It was a dangerous game, letting her think she was winning. But overconfidence would make her careless, and carelessness would give us the evidence we needed. The breakthrough came on a Thursday night in October. Trent had been following Greg's Porsche for 3 days, documenting his routes and stops. Most of his destinations were predictable: his office, expensive restaurants, the country club. But on Thursday, he drove 40 minutes outside the city to a lake house that wasn't registered in his name. "It belongs to a shell company," Lila reported, "which belongs to another company which is owned by a trust. But I traced it back. The trust is controlled by Greg's business partner." "Marta," I said. "Marta." We had found their love nest. That Friday, I told Marta I was going to a work conference in Milwaukee and would be back Sunday. Instead, Trent and I drove to the lake house and set up surveillance equipment in the woods across the water. The house was isolated, expensive, and perfect for clandestine meetings. We didn't have to wait long. Marta's BMW arrived first, just after sunset. She parked behind the house where the car wouldn't be visible from the road. 20 minutes later, Greg's Porsche pulled up beside it. Through Trent's high-powered camera lens, I watched my wife of 23 years embrace another man with the kind of passion she hadn't shown me in years. They moved together like dancers who'd rehearsed their steps, comfortable and familiar. "How long do you think this has been going on?" Trent asked quietly. "At least a year," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Maybe longer." We documented everything: their arrival, their embrace, the intimate dinner they shared on the deck overlooking the lake. When they moved inside, Trent's thermal imaging camera tracked their movements through the house. "That's enough," I said after an hour. "We have what we need." But as we packed up our equipment, headlights appeared on the access road. Another car was approaching the lake house. "Crap," Trent muttered. "Someone's coming." We crouched in the underbrush as a black Mercedes pulled up to the house. The driver got out, and even in the darkness, I recognized the silhouette. Susan Waters, Greg's wife. "This just got interesting," Trent whispered. Susan walked to the front door and knocked. Through our equipment, we could hear raised voices from inside the house. The door opened, and Greg appeared, clearly flustered. Susan pushed past him into the house. What followed was 15 minutes of shouting that our audio equipment picked up clearly. Susan wasn't just suspicious, she was furious. She knew about the affair, had known for months, and had finally decided to confront them. "You think I'm stupid?" Her voice carried across the water. "You think I don't know about your little hooker?" Marta's response was inaudible, but Susan's reply was crystal clear. "Don't you dare speak to me, you pathetic witch. You're not the first, and you won't be the last." When Susan stormed out, she paused beside Greg's Porsche and did something that made me smile in the darkness. She keyed a long scratch down the driver's side, then got in her Mercedes and drove away. Greg and Marta emerged from the house 20 minutes later, their romantic evening thoroughly destroyed. They left separately, Marta first, then Greg after checking the damage to his precious car. "Well," Trent said as we hiked back to our vehicle, "that was educational." "More than you know," I said. "Susan Waters just became our secret weapon." The plan crystallized over the following weeks like frost forming on a window, slow, deliberate, and beautiful in its precision. Lila had done her homework on Susan Waters, and what she'd discovered was better than I'd dared hope. "She's not just wealthy," Lila explained during our Monday morning meeting at Trent's office. "She's vindictive. 3 years ago, her husband's previous affair partner ended up blacklisted from every social organization in the city. The woman had to move to Denver to find work. So Susan knows how to destroy people," I said. "She's an artist at it. The question is whether we can direct that talent toward our targets. I studied the surveillance photos spread across Trent's desk. Greg and Marta at the lake house embracing in the moonlight. The images were crystal clear, professionally shot, and utterly damning. We don't need to direct anything, I said. We just need to make sure she sees these at the right time and place. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Pinnacle Advertising was hosting their annual client appreciation dinner at the Riverside Country Club. Marta had been planning the event for months, and she'd made sure to invite all the important people, clients, colleagues, and their spouses, including Susan Waters, whose family trust was one of Pinnacle's biggest accounts. It's perfect, I told Trent. Marta will be giving a presentation about the agency's successes this year. All I need is 30 seconds of access to her laptop. And how exactly do you plan to get that access? I smiled. I'm her husband. I'm supposed to be there supporting her. The night of the dinner, I dressed carefully. My best suit, the tie Marta had bought me for our anniversary, cologne that she'd once said made her want to rip my clothes off. I wanted to look like the devoted husband, right up until the moment I wasn't. The country club was elegant in that understated way that screamed old money. Crystal chandeliers, oil paintings of long-dead robber barons, waiters who moved like ghosts. Marta looked stunning in a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. You clean up nice, she said when she saw me, her tone suggesting mild surprise that I was capable of looking presentable. I wanted to make a good impression, I said. This is your big night. Greg was holding court near the bar, regaling a group of clients with some story that required expansive hand gestures. He caught my eye and nodded, the casual acknowledgement of one husband to another at a social function. If he felt any guilt about sleeping with my wife, it didn't show. Susan Waters sat at a corner table, looking bored and slightly carnivory. She wore diamonds the way other people wore armor, and her smile had all the warmth of a tax audit. Ladies and gentlemen, the MC announced, please welcome Pinnacle Advertising's creative director, Marta Monroe. Marta took the small stage with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. Her presentation was polished, professional, and filled with the kind of marketing speak that made everything sound revolutionary. This year has been about building relationships, she said, clicking through slides on her laptop. About understanding what our clients truly need and delivering solutions that exceed expectations. The irony was delicious. I waited until she was deep into her presentation, her attention completely focused on the audience. Then I slipped away from my table and made my way to the small backstage area where she'd left her laptop bag. Trent had prepared a USB drive that would copy specific files and install a small program. Nothing malicious, just something that would give us remote access when we needed it. The entire process took less than 2 minutes. When I returned to my seat, Marta was wrapping up her presentation to polite applause. She looked radiant, successful, completely in control of her world. That was about to change. Phase 1 complete, I texted Trent from under the table. His response was immediate. Phase 2 in progress. While I'd been playing the supportive husband, Trent and Lila had been busy. The surveillance photos were being printed at a high-end photography studio downtown. Large format, professional quality, the kind of images that would be impossible to dismiss as fakes or misunderstandings. The photos would be delivered to Susan Waters' home the next morning, along with a detailed timeline of Greg and Marta's activities. No note, no explanation, just the evidence, presented clearly and irrefutably. But that was just the opening move. Darling, you were wonderful up there, I told Marta as the evening wound down. We stood near the valet station, waiting for our car, surrounded by other couples making similar small talk. It went well, didn't it? She said, her cheeks flushed with wine and success. Greg thinks the Morrison account is definitely going to renew. Greg seems very invested in your success. She looked at me sharply. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, just an observation. Our car arrived, and I helped her into the passenger seat like the gentleman I'd been raised to be. As we drove home through the quiet suburban streets, Marta chattered about the evening's successes and the clients she'd impressed. Susan Waters seemed interested in expanding their campaign, she said. She asked me to call her tomorrow to discuss some new ideas. I almost laughed out loud. Susan Waters would indeed be expecting a call, but not the kind Marta was anticipating. That sounds promising, I said. The next morning, I was in my office when my phone rang. Lila's name appeared on the screen. Package delivered, she said without preamble. Our mutual friend received her morning surprise about an hour ago. And let's just say she's a woman of action. She's already made 3 phone calls, one to a lawyer, one to a private investigator, and one to someone at the country club. The country club? Apparently, she's on the membership committee, and she's very interested in reviewing the club's policies about moral conduct among members. I felt a warm glow of satisfaction. Susan Waters wasn't just going to destroy Greg and Marta. She was going to do it systematically, using every tool at her disposal. There's more, Lila continued. She also called Pinnacle Advertising and requested a meeting with the senior partners, not with Marta or Greg, with their bosses. When? This afternoon. I hung up and leaned back in my chair, staring out at the city skyline. 24 hours ago, Marta had been on top of the world, basking in professional success and secure in her secret relationship. Now, her world was about to come crashing down, and she didn't even know it yet. My phone buzzed with a text from Marta. Susan Waters canceled our meeting. Very rude about it. Something's wrong. I typed back, I'm sure it's nothing serious. Maybe she's just having a bad day. But I knew better. Susan Waters was having a very good day. The kind of day that came from finally having the ammunition to destroy your enemies. And this was just the beginning. At 3:47 p.m., my phone rang again. This time it was Marta, and she sounded panicked. David, I need you to come pick me up. Something's happened at work. Something terrible. What kind of something? I can't talk about it on the phone. Just come get me. Please. I found her waiting outside the Pinnacle building, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I'd seen her in years. Her confident professional demeanor had evaporated, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like fear. What happened? I asked as she got into the car. Susan Waters went to the partners, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She had evidence, photos of me and Greg. What kind of photos? She turned to look at me, her eyes searching my face for something, understanding maybe, or forgiveness. The kind that end careers, David. The kind that destroy marriages. I kept my expression carefully neutral. How bad is it? They've suspended both of us pending a full investigation. The Morrison account is pulling their business. 3 other clients have requested new account managers. She buried her face in her hands. 20 years of work, David. 20 years, and it's all gone. I'm sorry, I said, and I almost meant it. What happens now? I don't know. The partners want to meet with me again tomorrow. They're talking about termination, about breach of contract clauses. Greg thinks we should hire lawyers. Maybe you should? She looked at me again, and this time I saw something new in her expression. Suspicion. You're taking this very well, she said slowly. What do you want me to do? Scream? Throw things? Would that help? Most husbands would be upset about photos of their wives with other men. I pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine. Most husbands don't get toasted at dinner parties about their sexual inadequacies. The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a house fire. Marta stared at me, and I could see her mind working, trying to process this new version of her husband, the one who didn't fall apart when his world collapsed. David, she said carefully, what do you know about those photos? I got out of the car without answering, but as I walked toward our front door, I allowed myself a small smile. The trap was closing, exactly as planned. The divorce papers were filed on a Tuesday morning, delivered to Marta by a process server who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I wasn't there to see her reaction. I was in my lawyer's office, reviewing the financial documents that would reshape both our lives. Miss Patel was everything I'd hoped for in a divorce attorney, sharp, ruthless, and completely unimpressed by emotional appeals. She'd built her reputation destroying unfaithful spouses, and she approached my case like a surgeon planning a complex operation. The surveillance evidence is excellent, she said, reviewing Trent's photographs for the 3rd time. But it's the financial documentation that will really hurt her. You've done remarkable work here, Mr. Monroe. While Marta had been playing house with Greg at the lake house, I'd been methodically documenting every suspicious expense. The shell company that owned the property was funded through Pinnacle Advertising's discretionary account. Money that technically belonged to all the partners, not just Greg and Marta. It's embezzlement, Miss Patel explained. They used company funds to finance their affair. The lake house, the expensive dinners, even the hotel rooms, it all traces back to money that wasn't theirs to spend. How much are we talking about? Conservatively, about $200,000 over the past 18 months. I whistled softly. That's a felony. Several felonies, actually. But here's the beautiful part. We don't have to press charges. We just have to threaten to... The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Marta could fight the divorce, try to claim half our assets, and drag the proceedings out for years, or she could accept a settlement that left her with significantly less than she might otherwise expect in exchange for my silence about the embezzlement. What about Greg? I asked. Mr. Waters has his own problems. His wife's lawyers are already circling. Between the divorce and the potential criminal charges, he's going to be too busy saving himself to help your wife. That afternoon, I drove to Ross's college to break the news in person. My son was 22, old enough to understand that marriages sometimes failed, but young enough to be devastated by the reality of it happening to his parents. We sat in his dorm room, surrounded by the controlled chaos of college life, textbooks, pizza boxes, posters of bands I'd never heard of. Ross listened without interruption as I explained the situation, leaving out the more sordid details but making it clear that his mother had made choices that ended our marriage. "Are you okay, Dad?" he asked when I finished. "I'm getting there." "And Mom? Is she... what's going to happen to her?" "Your mother is a survivor," I said. "She'll figure something out." Amelia was harder to find. She was studying abroad in London, 6 hours ahead, and living a life that seemed impossibly sophisticated compared to the suburban drama unfolding at home. I called her on Skype, watching her face on my laptop screen as I delivered the news. "I'm not surprised," she said after a long pause. "I'm sad, but not surprised. You guys haven't been happy for years." "You noticed?" "Dad, I'm 20, not blind. The question is why you waited so long to do something about it." I couldn't tell her the truth, that I'd spent months planning this moment, gathering evidence, building an airtight case against her mother. Instead, I said, "Sometimes it takes time to find the courage to change your life." "What about Mom? Does she know you know about... you know?" "She's figuring it out." Amelia was quiet for a moment, staring at something off camera. "She really screwed up, didn't she?" "Yeah," I said, "she really did." The counterattack came faster than I'd expected. On Thursday, Marta's lawyer, an expensive-looking man named Richardson who specialized in protecting wealthy women in messy divorces, filed a motion claiming I'd violated her privacy by conducting surveillance. "It's a desperate move," Ms. Patel explained during our emergency meeting. "But we need to be careful. If a judge decides the evidence was obtained illegally, we could lose everything." "Was it illegal?" "No. You hired licensed professionals to investigate suspected infidelity. Everything was done within the bounds of the law. But Richardson is hoping to muddy the waters, make this about your behavior instead of hers." The hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. I spent the weekend preparing my testimony, reviewing the timeline of events, and trying not to think about what would happen if we lost. On Sunday night, Trent called with unexpected news. "Greg Waters was arrested this afternoon," he said without preamble. "Arrested? For what?" "Attack. Apparently, he got into an altercation with Susan's divorce attorney outside the country club. There were witnesses." I almost laughed. "He hit a lawyer? Pushed him down a flight of stairs? The guy's in the hospital with a broken wrist and a concussion. Greg's looking at serious charges." This changed everything. Greg's arrest would dominate the local news, and his connection to Marta would be impossible to hide. More importantly, it demonstrated a pattern of behavior that would support our narrative about his character. "There's more," Trent continued. "Lila did some digging into Greg's finances. Turns out he's been skimming money from other accounts too, not just the one he shared with Marta. Susan's lawyers found evidence of at least $500,000 in questionable transfers." "Jesus." "Yeah, your wife picked a real winner." Monday's hearing was a masterclass in legal theater. Richardson painted me as a controlling husband who'd violated his client's basic right to privacy. He suggested that my surveillance was motivated by jealousy rather than legitimate suspicion, and he implied that I'd manufactured evidence to support a predetermined narrative. Ms. Patel destroyed him. She presented our evidence methodically, building a timeline that was impossible to refute. The financial records showing embezzlement. The surveillance photos that documented not just infidelity, but the systematic theft of company resources. The testimony from Pinnacle's senior partners about the damage Marta and Greg's actions had caused to the firm. "Your Honor," she said in her closing argument, "Mr. Monroe didn't violate anyone's privacy. He protected himself from a spouse who was not only unfaithful, but criminal. The evidence speaks for itself," the judge agreed. "Not only did he allow our evidence to stand, He commended me for the thoroughness of my documentation. "Mr. Monroe," he said from the bench, "in 30 years of family law, I've rarely seen a case prepared with such meticulous attention to detail. Your evidence will be admissible in all future proceedings." Richardson looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. Marta, sitting beside him at the defendant's table, stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Part hatred, part something that might have been respect. After the hearing, Miss Patel and I walked to the courthouse steps in silence. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of burning leaves and the promise of winter. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we negotiate," she said. "And given what just happened in there, we negotiate from a position of considerable strength." That evening, I sat in my home office, surrounded by the evidence that had consumed my life for the past 6 months. Photos, financial records, phone logs, surveillance reports, the complete documentation of a marriage's end. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. M." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Talk to my lawyer." Her response was immediate. "Please, David, just 5 minutes. I'm outside." I looked out my office window and saw Marta's BMW parked at the curb. She was sitting behind the wheel, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone screen. Against my better judgment, I walked outside. She rolled down her window as I approached. Even in the dim streetlight, I could see that she'd been crying. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes red and swollen. "You planned this," she said. "All of it. The surveillance, the evidence, the timing. You planned it from the beginning." "No," I said. "You planned it. I just documented it." "That toast," she whispered. "You've hated me since that toast." "I've hated you since I found out about Greg. The toast just made it public." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands on the steering wheel. "What do you want, David? Money? The house? What will it take for you to make this go away?" "It's already gone away," I said. "Your career, your reputation, your relationship with Greg, it's all gone. The only question now is whether you want to salvage anything from the wreckage, such as your freedom. Take the settlement Miss Patel offered. Don't fight the divorce, and maybe I don't press charges for the embezzlement." She looked up at me then, and I saw the exact moment she realized how completely she'd been outmaneuvered. "You fool," she said, but there was no heat in it, just exhaustion. "Yeah," I agreed, "but I'm a fool who's going to win." She drove away without another word, leaving me standing alone under the streetlight. In the distance, I could hear the sound of traffic, the ordinary noise of people going about their ordinary lives. But my life wasn't ordinary anymore. For the first time in years, it was exactly what I wanted it to be. The call came at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in November. I recognized the number. It was Jake Morrison, Marta's co-worker and Trent's brother. His voice was slurred with booze and anger. "You son of a witch," he said without preamble. "You destroyed her. You destroyed all of them." I sat up in bed, instantly alert. "Jake, what's going on?" "Don't play dumb with me, David. Marta's career is over. Greg's facing criminal charges. The whole agency is falling apart because of your little revenge fantasy." "I didn't create this situation," I said calmly. "I just exposed it. Bullcrap. You orchestrated this whole thing. You and my brother and that investigator. You planned it from the beginning." He wasn't wrong, but I wasn't about to admit it. "What do you want, Jake?" "I want you to call off your lawyers, drop the charges. Let Marta keep some dignity." "The charges aren't mine to drop. The embezzlement investigation is being handled by the district attorney's office." "Then use your influence. You started this. You can end it." I was quiet for a moment, listening to his labored breathing on the other end of the line. Jake had always been Marta's ally, covering for her absences and supporting her version of events. But now that the truth was out, he was scrambling to protect what was left of their professional relationship. "Jake," I said finally, "Marta made her choices. Now she has to live with the consequences." "You self-righteous prick. You think you're so much better than everyone else with your spreadsheets and your evidence and your perfect little case. But you're just as bad as she is." "How's that?" "Because you enjoyed it. You enjoyed destroying her. That makes you worse than a cheater. It makes you a sociopath." He hung up before I could respond. The next morning, I called Trent to warn him about his brother's call. We met for coffee at our usual spot, a diner downtown that served breakfast all day and minded its own business. Jake's always been protective of his friends, Trent said, stirring sugar into his coffee. But he's also drunk most of the time these days. The agency's laying people off, and he's probably next on the list. Is he dangerous? To himself, maybe. To you? Probably not. But we should keep an eye on him. That afternoon, I got a call from Miss Patel with news that changed everything. Marta wants to meet, she said. No lawyers, no recording devices, just the two of you to discuss a final settlement. That sounds like a terrible idea. It is. But she's threatening to go public with her side of the story if you don't agree. She's talking to reporters, claiming you stalked and maltreated her. Let her talk. We have evidence. David, listen to me. The court of public opinion doesn't care about evidence. If she gets her story out first, frames herself as the sufferer of an abusive husband, it could complicate things. I thought about it for a moment. Where does she want to meet? Neutral ground. The coffee shop where you and Trent first met. When? Tonight, 7 o'clock. I arrived early and chose a table in the back corner where we could talk without being overheard. The coffee shop was busy with the after-work crowd, people grabbing caffeine fixes and catching up on their phones. Marta walked in exactly at 7, looking around nervously before spotting me. She'd lost weight over the past few weeks, and her usually perfect appearance showed signs of strain. Her hair wasn't quite right. Her makeup couldn't completely hide the dark circles under her eyes. Thank you for coming, she said as she sat down across from me. Miss Patel said you had something to discuss. I want to know what it will take to end this, not the legal stuff. That's between the lawyers. I want to know what you need from me personally to make you stop. Stop what? Stop destroying me. Stop turning our friends against me. Stop making sure I can't get another job in this city. I studied her face, looking for signs of the woman I'd married 23 years ago. She was still there, underneath the desperation and exhaustion, but she seemed smaller somehow, diminished. I haven't turned anyone against you, I said. I've just told them the truth. Your version of the truth. The documented, photographed, legally verified truth. She was quiet for a moment, staring at her untouched coffee. I know you hate me, she said finally. I know you think I'm a terrible person, but we have children together, David. We have a history. Doesn't that count for something? It counted for something when you decided to sleep with Greg Waters. It counted for something when you humiliated me in front of our friends. It counted for something when you stole money to finance your affair. I never meant for it to go this far. What did you mean? She looked up at me then, and for the first time in months, I saw something genuine in her expression. Not calculation or manipulation, just exhaustion. I meant to leave, she said. Greg and I were going to leave our spouses, start over somewhere else. We had plans. What changed? Susan happened. Greg's arrest happened. The embezzlement investigation happened. She laughed bitterly. Turns out Greg isn't as brave as he pretended to be. When things got complicated, he threw me under the bus to save himself. So now you want me to save you instead? I want you to let me disappear with some dignity intact. Drop the embezzlement charges, agree to a reasonable settlement, and I'll move away. You'll never have to see me again. It was tempting, I had to admit. The idea of ending this cleanly, without the continued drama and legal complications, had appeal. But there was something she didn't understand about what she'd put me through. Do you remember what you said that night? I asked. At the dinner party, when you made your toast? David, I was drunk. I didn't mean... You said I was the one who pays the bills, but never became good in bed. In front of our friends, in front of our children. She winced. I'm sorry about that. I really am. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. You're sorry there were consequences, but you're not sorry you said it, because it's what you really think of me. That's not true, isn't it? For how long have you looked at me and seen nothing but a boring accountant who pays the bills? How long have you been planning your exit strategy? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Here's what's going to happen, I said, leaning forward. You're going to take the settlement Miss Patel offered. You're going to plead guilty to the embezzlement charges and accept whatever sentence the DA recommends. And you're going to do it quietly, without trying to spin yourself as the sufferer. And if I don't, then I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. Not just our friends, everyone, your family, your former colleagues, every potential employer in this city. I'll make sure your name is permanently associated with theft, infidelity, and professional misconduct. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her weighing her options. Finally, she nodded. You've changed, she said quietly. No, I replied. I just stopped pretending to be someone I'm not. She left without another word, walking out into the November night like a woman heading to her own execution. I sat alone at the table for another 20 minutes, finishing my coffee and watching the ordinary people around me live their ordinary lives. My phone buzzed with a text from Trent. Everything okay? I typed back, it's over. But even as I sent the message, I knew it wasn't quite true. There was still one more scene to play out. One final confrontation that would determine how the story really ended, and I had a feeling it was going to be spectacular. 2 days later, Jake Morrison showed up at my office. He'd been drinking. I could smell the booze from across my desk, and his eyes had the wild look of a man who'd run out of options. She's broken, he said without preamble. Completely broken. Are you happy now? Jake, you need to leave. You're drunk and you're making a scene. I'm making a scene? You destroyed 3 people's lives over a stupid toast. You turned their mistakes into a public execution. My secretary appeared in the doorway looking concerned. Mr. Monroe, should I call security? That won't be necessary, I said. Mr. Morrison was just leaving. But Jake wasn't finished. You know what the worst part is? You think you're the hero in this story. You think you're some kind of righteous avenger, getting justice for all the wronged husbands in the world. I think I'm a man who got tired of being lied to. No, you're a man who got off on revenge, and that makes you sicker than any cheater. He turned to leave, then stopped at my office door. This isn't over, David. People like you always go too far, and when you do, I'll be there to watch you fall. After he left, I sat at my desk for a long time, thinking about what he'd said. Was he right? Had I gone too far? Had my desire for justice crossed the line into something darker? But then I remembered Marta's toast, the laughter of our friends, the months of lies and deception. I remembered the humiliation, the betrayal, the way she'd looked at me like I was nothing more than a convenient source of income. No, I decided. I hadn't gone too far. I'd gone exactly far enough. The Christmas party was Marta's idea, which made it perfect for my purposes. She'd planned it months ago, back when she thought she was untouchable, back when Greg Waters was going to be her ticket to a better life. Now, 3 weeks before Christmas, it had become something else entirely. A farewell performance for a woman whose world had completely collapsed. I can't cancel it, she'd told me during one of our final settlement meetings. Everyone's already committed. The caterers are paid. If I cancel now, it'll look like I'm admitting guilt. Aren't you? She'd given me a look that could have frozen hell. I'm pleading guilty to embezzlement charges. I'm not admitting to being a bad person. The distinction seemed important to her, so I let it stand. Besides, the party served my purposes perfectly. Everyone would be there. Our former friends, her colleagues, family members who'd heard rumors but didn't know the full story. It would be the perfect venue for the final act of this drama. The party was scheduled for December 22nd, a Saturday night. Marta had rented the community center at our country club, the same venue where she'd given her triumphant presentation just 2 months earlier. The irony was too perfect to ignore. I spent the week before the party making my own preparations. Trent and Lila helped me compile a comprehensive presentation, not just the surveillance photos, but a complete timeline of the affair, the embezzlement, and the cover-up. Financial records, phone logs, witness statements, everything organized into a narrative that was impossible to dispute. This is thorough, Lila said, reviewing the final version. Maybe too thorough. Are you sure you want to do this publicly? She made our marriage public when she toasted my sexual inadequacy in front of our friends, I replied. Turnabout is fair play. This goes beyond turnabout, David. This is complete annihilation. Good. Trent was more direct. You know there's no coming back from this, right? Once you do this, you'll be the guy who destroyed his wife at a Christmas party. Some people will think you're a hero. Others will think you're a monster. What do you think? He was quiet for a moment. I think she had it coming. But I also think you should be prepared for the consequences. The night of the party, I dressed carefully. The same suit I'd worn to Marta's presentation, the same tie, even the same cologne. I wanted to look like the devoted husband, right up until the moment I revealed what that devotion had cost me. The community center was decorated with elegant Christmas touches, white lights, silver ornaments, tasteful garland that probably cost more than most people's holiday budgets. About 60 people were in attendance, a mix of Marta's professional contacts, our former social circle, and family members who'd driven in from out of state. Marta looked stunning, as always. She'd chosen a deep red dress that complemented her auburn hair, and she moved through the crowd with practiced grace, playing the role of gracious hostess despite everything that had happened. To someone who didn't know the full story, she might have seemed like a successful woman celebrating another year of professional achievement. Greg Waters wasn't there, of course. He was out on bail, awaiting trial on attack charges and facing his own embezzlement investigation. His absence was notable. Several people asked about him, and Marta deflected the questions with vague references to personal matters. Ross and Amelia flanked me near the bar, both of them looking uncomfortable. They knew what was coming. I'd briefed them the night before, giving them the option to leave early if they wanted to avoid the confrontation. "Are you sure about this, Dad?" Ross had asked. "I mean, she's still our mom." "Your mom made her choices," I'd replied. "Now I'm making mine." Amelia had been more direct. "She deserves this, but are you prepared for how it's going to look?" "I've been prepared for months." Now, watching Marta work the room, I felt a familiar mixture of anticipation and disgust. She was still performing, still trying to control the narrative, still believing she could charm her way out of the consequences of her actions. At 9 o'clock, she called for everyone's attention. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she said, her voice carrying easily across the room. "This has been a difficult year for many of us, but it's also been a year of growth and change. Sometimes we have to face hard truths about ourselves and the people we love." She paused, looking directly at me. "I want to thank my husband, David, for his support during these challenging times. Marriage isn't always easy, but the best marriages survive even the worst storms." The crowd murmured approval. Several people looked at me expectantly, waiting for my response to this public declaration of marital solidarity. I stood up slowly, straightening my tie. "Thank you, Marta," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the suddenly quiet room. "You're absolutely right about marriage surviving storms. The question is whether it should." I walked to the front of the room, where a laptop was connected to the large screen Marta had used for her earlier remarks. Trent had helped me prepare the presentation, and it was loaded and ready to go. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, looking out at the crowd of familiar faces, "my wife is correct that this has been a year of hard truths. Tonight, I'd like to share some of those truths with you." I clicked to the first slide. A photograph of Marta and Greg embracing on the deck of the lake house, silhouetted against the sunset. The image was beautiful and damning in equal measure. The room went completely silent. This photograph was taken on October 15th at a lake house owned by a shell company controlled by my wife and her business partner, Greg Waters. I continued, my voice steady and professional. It's one of several dozen images documenting an affair that lasted approximately 18 months. I clicked to the next slide. Financial records showing the embezzlement. The lake house was purchased with funds stolen from Pinnacle Advertising's client accounts. Over the course of their relationship, my wife and Mr. Waters embezzled approximately $200,000 to finance their affair. The crowd was starting to react now. Gasps, whispered conversations, people pulling out their phones to record what was happening. Marta stood frozen at the side of the room, her face pale with shock. "But the financial crimes are just part of the story," I continued. "The real story is about betrayal, manipulation, and the consequences of treating other people like they don't matter." I clicked through more slides, phone records, hotel receipts, witness statements from Pinnacle employees who'd covered for the affair. Each piece of evidence was presented clearly, methodically, building an irrefutable case. "Some of you were at a dinner party at our house in September," I said, looking directly at Victoria, Marta's sister. "You might remember a toast my wife made about my sexual inadequacy. What you didn't know was that she'd been sleeping with another man for over a year at that point." Victoria looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "The toast wasn't spontaneous cruelty," I continued. "It was calculated humiliation, designed to push me toward divorce, while allowing her to maintain her image as the wrong party." I clicked to the final slide. A photograph of Greg being arrested outside the country club, his hands cuffed behind his back. Mr. Waters was arrested last month for attack. He's also facing embezzlement charges and a messy divorce that will likely leave him bankrupt. My wife has pleaded guilty to her role in the theft and will be sentenced next month. I closed the laptop and looked out at the stunned crowd. "Marriage is indeed about surviving storms," I said. "But some storms are caused by the people we trust most. And sometimes the only way to survive is to stop pretending the storm isn't happening." The room erupted. People were shouting, crying, pulling out phones to call friends and family. Several guests headed for the exits, while others crowded around Marta, who had collapsed into a chair and was sobbing uncontrollably. Victoria pushed through the crowd toward me, her face twisted with rage. "How could you do this?" she screamed. "She's your wife, the mother of your children." "She was my wife," I corrected. "Now she's my ex-wife. And the mother of my children should have thought about them before she decided to steal money and humiliate their father." Jake Morrison appeared at Victoria's side, drunk and belligerent. "You son of a witch," he slurred. "You planned this whole thing. You're sick." "I documented the truth," I replied calmly. "If that makes me sick, what does stealing money and betraying your family make you?" Jake lunged at me, but Trent intercepted him smoothly, grabbing his arm and steering him toward the exit. "Time to go, Jake," Trent said firmly. "You've had enough excitement for one night." As the crowd began to thin out, I found myself standing alone near the Christmas tree, watching the wreckage of what had once been my social circle. Some people avoided eye contact as they left. Others stopped to shake my hand or offer awkward words of support. Ross and Amelia approached me together, both looking shaken by what they'd witnessed. "Dad," Ross said quietly. "That was intense." "It was necessary," I replied. "Was it?" Amelia asked. "I mean, she was already destroyed, the legal stuff, losing her job, the divorce. Wasn't that enough?" I looked across the room at Marta, who was being helped to her feet by her sister and a few remaining friends. She looked broken, defeated, utterly humiliated. "Remember her toast," I said. "Remember how she looked at me when she said those words. Remember how everyone laughed." Amelia nodded slowly. "I remember." "Then you understand why this was necessary." As we walked toward the exit, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to find Susan Waters, impeccably dressed and wearing a smile that was equal parts admiration and calculation. "Mr. Monroe," she said, "that was quite a performance." "It wasn't a performance. It was justice. Sometimes they're the same thing." She handed me her business card. "If you ever need anything, legal advice, financial consulting, or just someone who understands the value of thorough preparation, please don't hesitate to call." I pocketed the card. "Thank you." "Thank you," she replied. Watching Greg get what he deserved was worth the price of admission. Outside, the December air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of snow and pine trees. Christmas lights twinkled in the windows of nearby houses, and I could hear the distant sound of holiday music from other parties, other celebrations. "What happens now?" Ross asked as we walked to our cars. "Now we move on," I said. "We build new lives, make new friends, create new traditions." "Without Mom?" "Your mother made her choice. She chose Greg Waters and stolen money and public humiliation over her family. Those choices have consequences." Amelia was quiet until we reached my car. Then she turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Dad," she said, "I love you, and I understand why you did what you did. But promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you'll never do anything like this to someone I care about." I looked at my daughter, smart, beautiful, strong-willed, everything I'd hoped she would become, and saw something in her eyes that gave me pause. Not fear, exactly, but a new understanding of who her father really was. "I promise," I said, and meant it. As I drove home through the quiet suburban streets, I thought about Marta's toast and the chain of events it had set in motion. 6 months ago, I'd been a boring accountant married to a woman who saw me as nothing more than a source of financial security. Tonight, I was a free man whose ex-wife would spend the next several years rebuilding her life from the ground up. The house was quiet when I arrived, decorated with the Christmas lights Marta had put up before everything fell apart. I poured myself a glass of the good scotch I'd been saving for a special occasion and sat in my living room, surrounded by the remnants of a 23-year marriage. My phone buzzed with a text from Trent. "Hell of a show tonight. You okay?" I typed back, "Better than okay, I'm free." Another text, this one from Lila. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." I smiled and turned off my phone. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, covering the neighborhood in a blanket of white that made everything look clean and new. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe.